Manca I need this up for Bob. All right. Yeah, that'd be perfect. So I've got three of them back there.
I will stand.
That one with a bottle of water on it.
We should talk about Machiavellian virtue and how the kingpin is the real hero. I haven't seen it yet, but I've told it's amazing. I wanted to write it. They're doing cinematic, and so I couldn't do Netflix Daredevil. So I said, let's do something when they do TV.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello, in the back? Awesome. Well, welcome, everyone. On behalf of myself and David Perlmutter, Dean of the College of Media and Communication, welcome to the Texas Tech Library and tonight's program. This evening, panelists will discuss one of the greatest supervillains of all time, the Joker. Copies of the recently released book, The Joker, A Serious Study of the Clown Prince of Crime, will be available online, or you can purchase it from Barnes & Noble. Unfortunately, they sold out, so good for them. But we do have other books here on the table by the authors, so please come and do it. We want to thank the staffs of the library and College of Media and Communication for their help with this event. We also want to thank Texas Tech Communications and Marketing for arranging the YouTube live streaming and live tweeting of tonight's discussion. I also want to thank Alamo Drafthouse Theater for donating the popcorn. And after the panel discussion, we'll have a signing of the books if you like, or if you brought a copy of your own, as well as some free flyers from tonight's events if you want to take those with you. Oh, and by the way, I'm Bella Gerlich. I'm the Dean of Libraries. I usually introduce myself off right there. So our panelists for this evening are as follows. Professor Rob Weiner. He's written numerous books and articles on superheroes, comics, graphic arts, and more. He will be a guest presenter at the Denver Comic-Con in May, and he is often at events such of those around the nation. He was at WonderCon, he was at another Comic-Con. He has quite the following, I do believe. Dr. Rob Peaslee is an associate professor and chair in the Department of Journalism and Electronic Media. His research deals with various dimensions of film and visual culture, including sequential art, documentary, film, and cultural geography. He is published in a variety of journals. He will also be at the Comic-Con in Denver. Associate Professor Ryan Litzy heads the Document Delivery Department at the University Libraries. He has published many scholarly articles, and his latest publication is a chapter in the book, The Joker. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Weiner. He's going to do a little PowerPoint presentation for us on the Joker before the event gets started.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to take a moment to say thanks to Dean Gerlich because this was her idea. So let's give her a hand. Thank you. This would not happen without her. I'd also like to take a moment to thank my beautiful mother who came all the way from Idaho just to be here tonight. So thank you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the roots of the Joker. The Joker in comics. I'm sure most of you know the Joker from the films, but what about the Joker in comics for the last 85 years? Okay. So the Joker card, well, as we know, that's the wild card. Anything can happen when you use it. The idea of a Joker. in a card deck, right? First appearance, Batman #1, 1940. Okay, the inspiration for the character was a number of things in addition to the Joker card. That also included a story called Death's Harlequin from the Shadow magazine. Anybody remember that? Know what that is? It's a pulp character. Yeah, one or two people, most of you not. Yeah, I get it. All right. There was also a story called The Grim Joker, featuring a criminal called the Joker against Detective Bulldog Black. Yeah. So, created by three people, Jerry Robinson and Bill Finger, who are pictured here, and Bob Kane. The story itself was written by Bill Finger, and Jerry Robertson drew it, brought it together, created the design of the Joker along with Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Influenced visually by the 1928 film The Man Who Laughs, starring Conrad Veidt there, based on the Victor Hugo novel. And as you can see, there's not too much of a stretch to see some similarities there, right? And in this first Joker story, the Joker, well, he's a typical gangster and he kills people. And one of my awesome students in my honors class pointed out that the Joker gas, or Joker venom as it's known today, left people with a smile on their face when they're dead. Still doing that now. So there's this timeless quality to the methods in which the Joker kills that makes him still relevant today. Joker given an origin of sorts in Detective Comics 1968 as the Red Hood. I'm sorry. Yeah, Detective Comics 168, 1951 as the Red Hood, okay, where the Joker is this master criminal, falls into a vat, wears this hood over himself, and maybe some of you saw an episode recently of Gotham that took that mythology even further. And Batman, what's interesting about this story is that he is playing in the story a professor of criminology. And he's teaching students about how to catch criminals. So it's a really great story. But truth be told, there is no real definitive origin of the Joker. There are a number of books that have tried to tell certain origin stories, but nothing sticks completely. So in the 1950s to the 1960s, the Joker changed a little bit, and he didn't kill people as much because you really couldn't do that in comics back at that time because of what was known as the Comics Code. So what they did was make the Joker, well, more of a trickster type figure. And the Joker was always playing pranks on Batman. Sure, he was still into crime, tried to steal money, occasionally would team up with somebody like Lex Luthor. The artist who created the Joker's look that was most prominent was a man by the name of Dick Sprang. And a very famous story was Joker's Millions from Detective Comics 180 in 1952. That was actually remade in the 1990s as one of the animated series episodes, and a very faithful adaptation to that. Now, the next slide is going to be one of the most important ones you're going to see all evening. You will take this away when you leave tonight, okay? This image. The Joker was also in one of the most interesting mashups in the history of graphic narrated literature. In Jerry Lewis, number 67, 1966. Yes, there were such comics. There was even a Bob Hope comic. Yeah, and we've got the Joker's Health Club. Here the Joker's attempting to kill Jerry Lewis with a laser. Batman and Robin save the day. See the Joker here is attempting to shoot Jerry Lewis, saying, any last words? And of course, Lewis, I'm not going to scream help, but you get the idea. So all of you will take this away when you leave this evening, I'm sure. So again, a very sort of, comical character in the 50s and 60s. But by the 1970s, we're back to the murderous sort of pulp roots of the Joker with a story by Denny O'Neil and artist Neil Adams called The Joker's Five-Way Revenge. But even more importantly, after that, we've got the laughing fish story where the Joker poisons the water. The fish all have the Joker grin, and the Joker tries to copyright this. And this story by Steve Englehart, who wrote the foreword to our book, and artist Marshall Rogers. But this contains, in my view, and I'm being totally serious here, one of the most brilliant pieces of sequential art storytelling. You can see the Joker's coming in. He's very confident. He's walking into what looks like a typical accountant guy, but somebody's working at the copyright office. The guy says, "Good Lord." The next screen says the Joker's like, "Where?" Okay? Not really conveying it as funny as it actually is, but it's amazing. And then it's truly brilliant, okay? Hats off to Englehart's writing here. But again, the Joker's killing folks here. All right. 1975, the Joker is given his own series. First time a villain, comic book villain, given their own particular title. And the Joker is self-aware on this first issue, saying he's Batman's #1 foe, so get out of the way. By the second issue, the Joker has to fight and contend with, and actually teams up with, one of the silliest villains in the history of graphic narrative, Willie the Weeper, whose power is crying. It's not pretty. Okay, it's pretty dumb. But it's also hilarious if you like, kitschy kind of things, and I do. So, all right, 1980s, whole nother ball game. A darker, deeper version of the Joker. Some of the most important stories in comic book history come out of this, including Digital Justice, where the Joker is a computer virus, Death in the Family, where he kills Robin, The Killing Joke by Alan Moore, where he cripples Batgirl and kidnaps Commissioner Gordon, The Dark Knight Returns, where he's an older Joker and there's an older Batman by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. And Arkham Asylum, which is the Batman version of Paradise Lost, where the Joker is an asylum inmate, as you can see right here, pretty creepy. The Joker as a computer virus in this other frame as well. And this was Digital Justice, just as a side note, was the second all-computer animated graphic novel. The first, oddly enough, was an Iron Man graphic novel called Crash. Bit of useless trivia there for you. All right, well, where are you going to go after you create these groundbreaking books? Well, you're going to try to normalize things a little bit. And in the 1990s, let's give the Joker a normal life. And so J.M. DeMatteis created a storyline called Going Sane. And here's the Joker as an attempt to give him a normal type of face. And he gets a girlfriend, a sweet, loving girl that he falls in love with. But whenever he sees anything that relates to Batman, Well, he goes a little batty. And it is the Joker. It doesn't quite work out that way, but it was, a good attempt at making the Joker, giving the Joker a normal life here. 2000s, Joker's back to his old tricks again. In 2000, directly, the Joker is in a series, featured in a series where he goes to Metropolis called Emperor Joker and is given the power to remake the universe any way he wants. Ultimately, it still doesn't work out well for the Joker, and Superman saves the day. But Englehart and Marshall Rogers come back on a series called Dark Detective in 2005. The Joker runs for the mayor of Gotham. Vote for me or I'll kill you. Let that sink in for a moment. And now, in the 2010 and beyond, we have the Joker as a postmodern monster. He has cut off his face willingly, and in Scott Snyder's Death of the Family, the Joker tries to kill all of Batman's extended family in order to make Batman a better person. Think about that one, okay? And that is a very, very brief history of the Joker over 75 years. So now, thank you. I will turn it over to the Dean of Media and Communications. Thank y'all.
This event reminded me of something that I'd completely forgotten or completely repressed, depending on what you want to define it, was that when the second Batman movie, because there was a Batman movie from the TV series, but the one with Jack Nicholson came out in 1989, somehow, for some reason, I purchased this, which is one of the jackets that are worn by the henchmen of the Joker in that movie. And my wife reminded me about this, and so she found it in our closet. And I was trying to remember, why did I buy this? What possible, drew me? And I remember, I was a graduate student then. And what possibly interested me in the Joker as a graduate student? Well, there were two things. One is that, and I was very interested in your showing of the playing cards, because I had done some work about looking at the role of the fool in medieval courts. And the fool, you've probably seen in movies, the fool is somebody who is cracking a lot of jokes and making sort of saucy asides. But in medieval courts, there were actual cases where a joker, a fool, would be the designated truth teller to the king. In fact, there was a very famous case in French medieval history where the French had lost a big battle and no one wanted to tell the king, so they basically pushed the fool in there to tell the king, and presumably not be executed as the other people would have been. But then the other thing that struck me is that as a graduate student, I was surrounded by people who were very serious and important, or thought of themselves serious and important, i.e. professors. And I yearned to tweak them, to sort of poke them, to sort of break the order that I had to live under. And the Joker sort of was somebody who did that, who could sort of didn't follow any of the rules of the social order, could say anything and do anything they want. And of course, nowadays, no graduate student dreams of that, right? They're all shaking their head there. So. Well, anyway, thank you very much for coming. I think the Joker is one of those 85 years now that does have different meanings for different people. And we're going to have our panel, and Mr. Paul Hunton will be the moderator of the panel, and I'd like to introduce him for a moment now. Mr. Paul Hunton is a nonfiction filmmaker and the production director for Texas Tech Public Media, where he is the creator and host of the PBS digital series 24 Frames, which has been nominated for an Emmy Award 3 times. He worked on the set of the Academy Award-winning Coen Brothers film No Country for Old Men, as well as many other television shows and films. He is also a staff senator at TTU on the board of directors for Big Brothers Big Sisters Lubbock and Plainview, and teaches video production in the College of Media and Communication. Mr. Paul Hunt.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here. And I have to tell the audience I'm very impressed. You must be our DC folks because you've overcome two things. One, the debut of the Avengers 2 tonight. And two, and this probably doesn't account for many of you, but maybe it does, the pull to watch the NFL draft to be with us here. So overcoming those two things, you should give yourself a hand. But it is an honor to be here. I'd like to start with a very simple question because I think no one creates without purpose. And so the idea that you have chosen the Joker as your subject must say something about that character to you as individuals. So I want to start by asking what the Joker means to you, maybe that first interaction with the Joker for each of you, and what he represents to you. Let's start with Rob Weiner.
Unbridled chaos, which is a beautiful thing. Well, depending on your point of view, right?
What was your first introduction to the Joker?
Well, the comics, of course. My favorite cinematic version is Jack Nicholson. But the Joker is just so interesting. And I've always said that in graphic storytelling, or in storytelling in general, that villains are far more interesting than heroes in a lot of ways. That in order to have a good narrative, you have to have a compelling villain. And I don't think that there is a more compelling villain than the Joker, period. Hands down.
Mr. Peaslee.
Yeah, I came to the Joker, I guess on, I don't remember if it was in the morning or the afternoon, but at some point when my parents weren't around, on the Batman television series, which was on Channel 38 in the Boston area. And so Cesar Romero was my first Joker. And, many Batman narratives, things got more interesting when the Joker was around. I liked the Riddler. The Penguin was okay, but the episodes where the Joker was there were more interesting. And I think there is something about the unpredictability of the character. Part of this is the shifting origin story of the character too, that allows for some of that chaotic kind of story framework to unfold. And if you know exactly where a character comes from and you understand their motivations, then you run out of options in storytelling terms relatively quickly. With the Joker, it's sort of an unending reservoir of possibility.
Ryan, for you?
I think for me, the first time I remember the Joker was the animated series in the mid-'90s, and then also the movie that Dean Perlmutter had mentioned as well. And I think for me, and I like to bother Rob with this a lot, for me, the Joker is the only true free character in the DC universe. He's the only one who has sort of a radical freedom. A lot of the other ones are really sort of constrained and within these nice little boxes, and the Joker just really isn't that. And I think that's also why you see him show up on like lists of heroes as well, which I think is fascinating. He's one of the only real villains that shows up as actual hero. And so even though this will bug Rob, for me the Joker's freedom. I mean, in a very sort of scary way. So.
The subtext, and you start the introduction by, on a very somber note, of the tragedy at Aurora, Colorado during the premiere of The Dark Knight Rises. And you sort of set up the Joker as sort of a reflection, sort of that mirror of cultural change in our society and in our culture. Is that something unique to the Joker, to be able to sort of, he transcends not only just popular culture, but actually sort of a reflection of society?
I mean, I certainly think so. I think that there's a part of that that changeability of the character allows for that. And I think that the different people who have contributed to the creation of the Joker's story over the last almost a century have done so obviously in their historical moment. And the Joker becomes a sort of a vessel into which these anxieties about society and so forth are readily poured. And obviously, there's also historical dimensions to how he can be represented, like the comics code and so forth. So I do think that there's a fruitful avenue for understanding the character in those terms as as a sort of point of reference, right, historically speaking. But the argument that we sort of made in the post 9/11 era, in our introduction, is that he's particularly relevant in an area of particular uncertainty, particularly here in the United States.
Rob, Ryan, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that's, just to go off of what Rob was saying, I mean, I think it's the chaotic origins of it all that sort of enable that kind of distinction.
Yeah, Ryan, your chapter in the book is very interesting. He's laughing. I told him I was going to grill him. Your chapter in the book is very interesting and is talking about sort of the modern Joker in the series Arkham Asylum, or the Batman, Arkham City, Arkham Asylum. They're all of those video games. But you touch on will to power, Nietzsche's will to power, and the Joker as a representative of the Superman from Nietzsche. Could you explain that to the audience a little bit?
Yeah, one of the reasons when Rob's been wanting to write, Rob Weiner has been wanting to write this book on the Joker for quite some time. And when I first started here, Rob and I were out to lunch one day, and he was like, "Oh, the Joker, I want to write a book on the Joker." And I said, "Well, the real thing about the Joker is he's more of a hero than Batman is." And Rob can't stand that. And so every time I say it, it really bothers him. So I'm going to say it several more times in the next few minutes. And one of the things I wanted to set up with the chapter and the idea is, Nietzsche writes a whole series of books about the will to power and the Übermensch, and the Übermensch has certain characteristics. And if you read these books, the Joker exhibits many of these characteristics. And so when we're thinking about the confines of modern society, and Nietzsche calls it good and evil, the dichotomy between good and evil, whereas the Joker exists in a dichotomy of good and bad. And so he sort of is an agent of his own making, right? He determines his own morality. He determines what is good for him. He determines what is bad for him, not evil, but bad. And one of the things that the Joker has a real problem with is he sees a kindred spirit in Batman, right? So Batman in many ways has this sort of same agency. He can more or less do whatever he wants. He drives around the city. He beats people up. He really sort of acts without boundaries, except the one boundary, right? He's not going to kill anyone. And for the Joker, in my reading of the Joker, that's a real problem for him. He essentially wants to free Batman. He sees Batman as in essence, a caged animal. And Nietzsche has a term for it. He calls him the man of ressentiment, which is a combination of resentment and sentiment. And so the man of ressentiment has similar characteristics as well. He lurks around in the shadows. He constantly is lying. He is very serious. And it's a perfect description of Batman. And so what I think the Joker is really seeing, or at least in my reading of him with the Nietzschean light, is what the Joker's really seeing is Batman is in essence lying to himself. And so he's imprisoning himself in his own chains. And to me, that's in essence being cowardly, and that's what Rob hates, is the Batman is essentially a coward. He's not actually a hero. And that's also why it's this sort of nuance to the Joker is why, like the other Rob said, none of the comic books are interesting until the Joker shows up, right? None of the movies are really interesting until the Joker shows up. And it's because only through the lens of the Joker do we see the real limitations and the real sort of unheroic actions of the Batman. He really is a coward. He walks around, he hides in the darkness, he lies to himself, he unfairly imprisons himself for whatever reason, and the Joker just really wants to sort of set him free. And that, to me, is what I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of the Joker as Dr. Phil is how I read your. When I read your chapter, I was like, I see what he's saying. The Joker is Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
I mean,
But you can't talk about the Joker without Batman, and it must really piss Batman off that the heights of the Batman character were one that Tim Burton, the first film in his trilogy or his series that. Starred Jack Nicholson as the Joker, and then Heath Ledger, obviously, playing the Joker. That must really piss Batman off, that the Joker gets all the credit. But you guys have touched on this, and in the introduction you touch on it, that Alfred Hitchcock said the more successful the villain, the more successful the picture, the more successful the story. And so the Joker's success is, it's sort of tantamount with Batman's as well. They sort of go together. Let's backtrack a little bit. We've gone to the inside of the book. Let's go outside. How did this book sort of come to be? Where did this start? 4 years ago, is that correct?
Well, actually, I had the idea for the book 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah, and I noticed that there was, well, there were lots of books on and material on, scholarly material on superheroes. There wasn't very much on supervillains, which is not to say it didn't exist in some form, but there wasn't any monograph about the Joker from a university press or an academic press, just about the Joker only. And so about 4 years ago, Rob and I wrote up a proposal, and it's gone through a very deep and dark, long process. Numerous peer reviews, and we've got the best press in the business for comic studies, we think anyway, and so we're quite pleased with it.
Rob Peaslee, touch on how you get all this material. How do you start to wean it down to what actually becomes the book?
Well, you flip a coin, and so we send out a call for abstracts. In this case, you don't always do this, but so short, kind of, I don't know, probably about 500 word, maybe 1,000 word abstracts, and from those we sort of say, okay, these are interesting ideas. Okay, these two sort of cancel each other out. We don't want to have too many articles on this topic, and eventually we send back to the authors, yes, please, send us a full article, and then we get those in, and we sort of see what they look like in their fully fleshed out form. And then once we've sort of made decisions on the ones that we're going to keep, we put them into manuscript form, and then we send them out to the publisher. So, that whole process is probably a year to 2 years before it even gets in front of a publisher. And then they look at it, and we actually, we had one publisher that passed, so then we kind of had to reboot and send it back out again. So Ryan and all the other authors were incredibly patient through that process, because it's time consuming, and often there are tenure decisions and promotion decisions riding on whether this stuff shows up in print. So thank you for that patience.
One thing that I just love about the book of what you guys have been able to do, and you set it up in the introduction, but you've actually been able to craft the Joker's narrative through his representation in the comics, in the movies. A lot of times, these books, sometimes you can't find a narrative thread, but you guys have been able to sort of find the narrative thread of the Joker throughout time. What is it about the essence of that character, of the Joker, that allows you to be able to sort of trace that narrative throughout our history as Americans and the Joker's history?
Well, I think it's a credit to our authors, first of all, that they're able to come at this character from so many different angles, both in terms of the particular medium that they address, whether it's video games or comics or animation or film, or other, right? Sort of these societal manifestations of the character, but also the disciplinary backgrounds of all the different authors. I mean, that's one of the things that I love the most about the book, is that it really is an interdisciplinary approach on this character, and I think that says something about interdisciplinarity, that we can approach this character from all these different directions and actually get a much clearer picture, not only of the character, the subject of the book, but perhaps our social context as a result of that.
And its impact on popular culture as a whole. I mean, there's, performance study, Lady Gaga and the Joker, one of your favorite pieces, the 4chan, looking at the Joker, how online behavior mimics the Joker, things like that, and how relevant all of that becomes. And, it's kind of like, novelist sometimes says that the novel writes itself, or the song writes itself, or the composer writes itself. And in a way, it's amazing, as Rob was saying, just how coherent the book is, even though it's so diverse as far as its theme. And the fact that you picked up on that as you were going through it, I think really it's I'm humbled by that. Thank you.
No, it's really, really great. I have read a ton of these types of books, and this one really is extraordinary. What are your favorite pieces from the book? And I know Ryan's sitting right there, so you might feel the need to be like, oh, Ryan's. But be honest.
Not Ryan's.
And maybe not your favorite, but yeah, obviously he's not your favorite.
But I wanted him in the book precisely because it's controversial, and it's always good to stir up the pot.
Yes,
And get people talking.
especially in the spirit of the Joker. I think sort of
Exactly.
keeping people on their toes is something that strikes. But maybe not even your favorite, but the most interesting. Something that really stuck out to you about one of these pieces.
I like the one about how the internet mimics the behavior, because there's that sort of discussion about like the chaos of the Joker and then the chaos of the internet. So I thought that one actually was really interesting. And then I'm biased, so I actually like mine as well. So.
Yeah, the piece that we're talking about looks particularly at the B board on 4chan. Some of you may be familiar with this area of the internet, which is a sort of dark and scary place. But it's also one of the major places that Anonymous was born, and where the notion of trolling was born, and doing it for the lulz. And so that piece sort of frames all of that activity as a contemporary manifestation of what the author calls the Joker ethos. I think that's pretty perceptive. The other piece that you mentioned about Lady Gaga is really interesting, because that piece attempts to sort of rehabilitate the Joker in some ways as a positive social force, in the same way that this author suggests Lady Gaga shows us a way of getting beyond the sort of normative performance of our gender and in other ways in which we're encouraged to behave normally. So too does the Joker sort of give us leave to change our identity, to change our origin, and therefore, as you alluded to, be more free. So I think that's interesting to think of him in that light, even if only for a moment.
Rob Weiner.
My favorite piece is the one on the animated history of the character, and how it looks at the various versions throughout, Super Friends and the New Adventures of Batman, all the way through the 1990s groundbreaking animated series, which still to this day, with Mark Hamill, remains one of the greatest versions of the Joker, and one of the best animated series ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go to the movies here a little bit. You have Jack Nicholson in the Tim Burton version. You have Heath Ledger in the Christopher Nolan version. Very similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, Heath Ledger, who passed away right before the film was released, and he posthumously won the Academy Award for playing that role. Both times there was some backlash on the choices of those actors. What is it that maybe makes people feel like they have a right to decide who should play the Joker? And is it because he's such a sort of beloved villain?
I guess I would venture a guess and say it's a couple of things. One is I think there's a perceived degree of difficulty in playing the character. And I think also it's, because of that changeability and because of that ability for us to, sort of to maybe see what we want to see in the character. When you sort of concretize that in a particular person, you're taking away options. You're taking away people's own sort of interpretation of that character and saying this is going to be what the Joker looks like. And I think the timing of this is obviously pretty serendipitous, because we've just been shown a new manifestation of what the Joker is going to look like, maybe, as with Jared Leto playing the part. And I think if you aren't familiar with this, go Google it and see what people have to say about it. It's not pretty.
They're pissed.
Yeah, they're pretty angry.
Everyone sits waiting to be outraged about something, and now they're angry.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that interpretation of the character, but I wonder about the wisdom of revealing the character, or revealing that interpretation ahead of time. Like, Nolan was pretty smart. We didn't know what the Joker was going to look like until we sat in our seats, and he pulls that mask off. What a great moment, right? I don't know if you can pull that off again or not, but it was an interesting moment when this far ahead of the film. I mean, we're a year out, and we get this reveal. I don't know. I'm not sure about it.
Well, I personally think, and let me know in a year if I'm right, that it's all one big joke. That, that's really not what he's going to look like. But if it is, well, he looks young and hip. Okay, he's a Joker for us, young people now.
I think that would be very Joker-esque if they trolled the internet for Joker rage about what the Joker looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be classic.
I really hope that's what's happening.
Yeah, I hope that's what's happening too. Because I'll
that
be
would
honest, I don't dig the tattoo on the head.
That would be terrific. We could
See,
write
they're
all-
already. I was saying people like to take ownership of them. Here they are picking it apart. The choices of.
I mean, I think for me, it's this idea that the nebulousness of the Joker is you can put so many things into it, and so a lot of people, like Rob was saying, they sort of put a little piece of themselves into it because, and this is just my perspective, is all of us identify with the Joker in some way, right? And so when you see that, and when you don't know what it looks like, you can see yourself, right? I could sort of see being that free. That's enticing, but also scary at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you, like Rob said, when you codify that into a person, now that's something I can fight against, and I do think that's one of the best lines the Joker's ever said in film is right in the beginning of The Dark Knight when he says, "Well, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stranger." Right? That's the perfect Joker line, right? Because it's just sort of this typical platitude tweaked just a little bit, where you ask yourself, "Did he just say what I think he said?" And then now you have to sort of unpack what that actually means. To me, that's one of the best Joker lines.
I think it's safe to say that the Joker is probably the most beloved villain of all time. I think maybe someone could argue someone else, but I would say that the Joker is pretty much head and shoulders above anyone else. How much does him not having a defined origin story benefit him as a character from a creator's standpoint?
Oh, I think tremendously, because you've got a wonderful thing to play with if you're writing the Joker. You can give him an origin story, but nothing's ever going to stick. It's not like when they gave Wolverine an origin, right? Even if DC decides to make a Joker origins, nobody's going to believe it because it's the Joker, right? We already know, that he prefers his origin to be multiple choice, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a wonderful thing, and there's, creators, artists, writers, they love to write the Joker. And, keep in mind that it's true that Batman stories are usually very compelling with the Joker, which is not to say that you can't have a good story with Two-Face or the Penguin or somebody else, but the Joker without Batman, like the Suicide Squad, is going to be a very different kind of Joker, right? It's not going to be what we're used to. So, it's whatever it is, it's going to be different. Mm-hmm. So we can't say, but it's a wonderful thing that it is so unique and changes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you.
And it's also, in a weird way, it's very empowering, right? Because the moment you don't know where he's from, all of a sudden now he sort of has the upper hand, right? You don't know how to address me or attack me, right? I don't have a weakness. I'm from wherever I am. Not only that, it creates some really funny things. I mean, there was one where he was an Iranian diplomat and he goes to the UN.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, it's a ridiculous comic, but it's still really funny. Like, you read it and you're like, why does the Joker's a politician now? And he tries to kill everyone in the UN. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's
Of course
hilarious.
he does.
It's just...
And the interesting thing in that story, it's not Batman who saves the day, because it's Superman.
I guess I would just also, this is all in line with what I would say. I mean, I think the lack of an origin also, it gives it creators are aware, I think, of the fact that creates avenues of identification within the audience, which also speaks to the idea of why he's as beloved as he is despite being a villain. We do sort of identify with the Joker. There is a certain amount of wish fulfillment that we would normally take from a superheroic character. Oh, I wish I could do these amazing things, wouldn't it be great? The Joker does those things too, in a darker, perhaps less, you don't talk about how much you'd like to do those things, but they're still there. That identification possibility is still there, and I think creators are pretty conscious of that too. So it does give them a lot of opportunities.
And even within the film, in The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger actually gives several origin stories of the Joker in several different points that don't match up. So it even adds to that illusion of mystery of his origin. We can't talk about the Joker without talking about Batman. And Ryan, your chapter touches on this, so let's start with you, and then Rob can defend Batman. You call Batman
Literally.
cowardly.
He's a coward.
And you talk about that last cutscene. Is it Arkham Asylum or which one?
Let me think. I think it's Arkham City. Yeah.
Arkham City. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's the last cutscene in Arkham City, and spoiler alert: the Joker is dying,
Right.
and Batman is standing above him with the cure, and it breaks. But then Batman reveals to him, "I would have saved you."
Yeah.
What is their relationship, and why do you think Batman is a coward?
Because for me, in my reading of the Joker, and this goes to the fact that if you don't agree with the Nietzschean philosophy, then the argument for Batman being a coward sort of starts to fall apart, and that's kind of where Rob and I diverge. But for me, and I argued this in the chapter, is Batman just won't commit to it. He's just... the Joker keeps priming the pump, and he just won't do it. I mean, he kills Robin, he drives Commissioner Gordon insane, he paralyzes Batgirl, and the guy just won't commit to doing what he needs to do to stop the Joker, and the Joker is very upset about this. And I think one of the other indications of this is when, in The Dark Knight, when he says this is what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. They are the exact same person coming from two different directions, and so the Joker wants to free Batman. The Joker is moved beyond good and evil, literally, and wants to have Batman experience that as well. And so for him, for the Joker, he sort of obsesses with this notion of moving Batman beyond good and evil. And when Batman won't do it, and it primarily centers around killing, when Batman won't do it, the Joker just has a real problem with it. And when you lie to yourself, that's being cowardly, and that's essentially what Batman is doing. He's lying to himself. He's denying his true nature, and so that is being cowardly. Rob hates this, though.
Rob, defend Batman.
Well, I see the relationship between Batman and the Joker as more of a bromance. All right? Batman
If they're going to do a Hangover 7, they should do it with Batman and the Joker.
Yeah.
They just wake up in Vegas and they're like, what happened?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
All
right on. But in all seriousness, there are two brothers, okay, and there's only one person whose approval the Joker cares about, and that's Batman's, okay, and I think in their own demented, twisted way, Batman loves the Joker, even though he says he hates him. And the Joker certainly loves Batman, even while he's trying to kill all of Batman's friends. Okay? So that's my kind of view. Yes, Batman won't kill the Joker. And yes, in the grand scheme of things, maybe all the people who the Joker kills, it's Batman's fault because he won't do it. I mean, I get that argument. But Batman's not a coward. Batman's cool.
I have no opinion on his cowardly nature.
Are you sure?
But the Joker is cooler. You know, if Batman's cool, then the Joker's cooler. I will give you that.
Yeah, and let's talk about his changing nature over time from a visual standpoint. You guys are in all your purple. Purple has kind of been part of that. Obviously, the origins of, you introduced him. Why can't I think of the name of the film? Rob, help me.
Man Who Laughs.
Man Who Laughs, thank you. So how has the visual nature of the Joker changed over time, but then also stayed true to that original intent?
Well, the smile is always there. And, you know, in The Man Who Laughs, the smile was painted on permanently. And you know, even though it was torturous and a horrible thing. The interesting thing to me is that the Joker, and I've said this on a number of occasions, is the only villain, a mass murderer, if you will, where there's children's socks. I mean, we don't have socks with Hitler and Satan on them, and they're the other two most famous villains, right? So I don't know. It's amazing because the Joker just has that appeal, where 5-year-old kids love the Joker and 85-year-old folks are afraid of him. And the Joker can be edgy in this, post 9/11 society, but also be just a fun trickster. And it works in both ways. The Joker doesn't always have to be a murderer. He can just be a prankster, playing pranks on Batman, trying to steal money, and it's still a good story.
Rob, Ryan, anything to add?
I guess if you look at some of that evolution that Rob showed us, I mean, one of my favorite visual representations of the Joker is in Arkham Asylum. It's just so crazy weird and beautiful, right? I mean, the artist's approach there is like it is a thing of beauty, but it's a really perverse kind of beauty, as is in some ways the Ledger approach. I mean, it's ragged and it's sort of horrifying and so forth, but it's also got a certain kind of like aesthetic beauty to it. And I think that that's part of that opportunity that the Joker affords creators, like we were talking about before, not just writers, but the illustrators too. There's a palette there to work with, but it's like infinite in terms of the possibilities.
And for me, I mean, it's also that sort of inherent conflict that we have within ourselves, right? You pass someone on the street and they're smiling, your initial reaction is, oh, they must be in a good mood, right? They must be a happy person. Well, happily murdering people is not something you normally put together, right? And so it's this weird dichotomy of what we traditionally experience as a positive emotion bound into something that is incredibly evil. And that smile is consistent throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. And that speaks to the sort of the face that we all put on every day, right? In all of our interactions at work, with our families, like we're always performing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe that's part of why the Joker appeals to us, because we understand that, we all have to kind of smile and grit our teeth a lot of the time
to get the job done.
Yeah.
One of the Joker doesn't wear a mask because he is the mask sort of thing, right? Like we wear masks over us of the Joker face, but that is his face. He always looks like that, and so he can't hide anything.
He's what Colonel Kurtz was talking about at the end of Apocalypse Now. He is the horror.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's sort of a weird place to turn to questions, but does anyone have any questions? Down here, Kent.
I come to this as an amateur fan, not hardcore. My timing is about like Dr. Peaslee's. It was Cesar Romero on the TV show First Run that was my introduction to the Joker. But I heard something just in the last week, and I can't remember where. I think I must have been falling asleep with the radio on. I heard someone talking about the DC universe, and the joke was, who would win if Superman and Batman, had it out? Well, okay, Superman clearly has actual superpowers that would probably mean he would win that fight. But I heard a great justification for Batman over Superman, and today is the first time that I found out the Joker is in both of those universes. I never knew about the crossover narratives. The defense I heard for Batman is that he answers to civil authority. Who is it that Superman answers to exactly? Like some guy on a planet, in another time.
Daddy issues.
There you go. And also, ultimately, is that what we want in a superhero, is someone whose allegiance remains always unknown to us, versus Batman, who checks with the commissioner, who's elected, after all.
So less of a question, more of a statement.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to add there? What do they think about it? No, sorry, I didn't. Yeah. What do you guys think about that idea of Batman answering to civil authority?
Yeah, well, that seems to be the particular thematic preoccupation that Zack Snyder is exploring in Batman versus Superman. which I find sort of an interesting notion, personally. I didn't hate the trailer as much as a lot of people on the internet.
Does he
appear to.
bleed? Or do you bleed?
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and you know, I've always been, as a fan, I've always been much more interested in Batman than I've ever been in Superman, and not necessarily for those reasons, but more because, like, well, you know, if he can fly backwards really fast around the Earth and, you know, turn back time, like, what's interesting about him, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think, you know,
Although that is the worst moment in the whole Superman history. Is
Which,
Fair.
and that's an interesting idea, that difference between sort of the juxtaposition of Batman against Superman, to where Superman there's no ends to what he can do. But one thing that just came up to make it Joker related is, because he's fallible, because he's human, because he's Batman, does he love the Joker because he gives him a purpose?
Oh, Batman would never admit that, so okay, he's a coward in that way, I suppose. All right, touche. But yeah, I mean, there's many of the people who've written the Joker or artists who've drawn him throughout the years have argued that point, you know, that they're, yeah.
Well,
They do love each other.
and Arkham Asylum, the book I was just talking about, I mean, there's a very prevalent sort of subtext of homoeroticism to that book, for sure.
And I mean in the video game too. I mean, he's actually sort of trying to cure Joker through most of it, in a very twisted way, because the Joker infects him too, or sort of infects him. But I guess what I would say is, why does Batman need to answer to civil authority would be sort of the statement that I ask, and that's just answering a question with a question. But and I, in my reading of the Joker, is that's sort of the Joker's question is, why is this necessary that you must do this, right? You possess what amounts to an infinite amount of power, power equivalent to this godlike human being who lives in another city. Why is it necessary that you answer to anyone, right? And to not address that within yourself makes you cowardly, right? It makes you afraid of your own potential.
Next question, yes, sir.
answer to anyone?
Well, I mean, I would say.
Depends on the story, right?
Yeah, it depends on the story. I mean, truth, justice, the American way.
Yeah, actually, I don't think the Joker would let Superman kill Batman. I'm pretty sure the Joker would stop Superman and be like, no, this is mine.
Yeah.
Find your own plaything.
My project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Joker likes playing with Superman because he can usually outwit Superman. He obviously can't beat him out in brawn. But
Yeah.
no, it's funny you mentioned the Batman vs Superman situation. Dark Knight Returns addresses that and the civil authority. And in that one, Superman actually does answer to civil authority. He answers to the president, and Batman is the one that doesn't. And so Batman is being put down. But the Joker, of course, wins in the whole story. He wins because he gets Batman to kill.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. He gets Batman to kill. So the Joker wins. It's not a contest between Batman and Superman. It's just Joker wins. So, question though, I guess, which is, I think you mentioned, Rob Weiner, what's your favorite version of the Joker is, but what are the two of you, what are y'all's favorite version of the Joker?
I really like the Mark Hamill Joker in the animated series in the mid-90s, but to me, by far, Heath Ledger, from a Nietzschean perspective, got it right. I mean, there are many, many scenes. The scene in there where he walks out with the hand grenades, like it'd be no big deal to just kill literally everyone, including himself. The whole line in the beginning, what doesn't kill you makes you stranger. Like, there's this very sort of chaotic calmness to him in the whole movie that's just super creepy. And I think he really got it right. I mean, the whole opening scene where there's no sound at all until he says something. I mean, that's just the whole thing that's done right.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to get past Ledger too, but I guess I would maybe go back to what everybody seems to believe is the main inspiration for Ledger, or at least one of them, which is Alan Moore's take on the Joker and The Killing Joke, which is my favorite Joker story for sure.
It's one of mine too, and you can see my copy that's in the case back there, and you can see that it's been well used because it's, well, got a lot of tabs on it.
Do we have another question? Oh, so who's got the microphone? Okay, there's a mic going around.
So you talk a lot about the relationship
Speak up a little bit. Sorry, speak up so they can hear you through the speaker system.
You talked a lot about the relationship between Batman and Joker, but I'd be interested to hear your take on the relationship between Harley Quinn and Joker, because it's something that you see change a lot throughout different series, such as like in the animated series, it's very much an abusive relationship, whereas in the Arkham games, it seems like Joker has more of a romantic attachment to Batman. If you look at the actual video sound clips within the game, he seems more even romantically attracted to Batman than Harley Quinn. So I'd be interested to see what you think, how Harley Quinn actually changes the interactions between Batman and Joker, and what Joker's actual views towards her are.
Well, I would say that the creation of Harley Quinn has been one of the most interesting additions to the Batman universe in its 70-plus year history. And it's, as you point out, a very complicated one. The one that I'm most familiar with, of course, is the Mad Love version of the animated series and the award-winning graphic novel by Paul Dini that is extremely abusive, where the Joker, treats Harley Quinn basically like a rag doll, but always ends up going back to her and drawing her back in. I mean, she was his psychiatrist, right? And he somehow manipulates her into falling in love with him and then abusing him, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Harley Quinn can also be, again, with the Joker being a reflection of societal mores. Harley Quinn can be that too, right? And their relationship is something of a reflection of what are the roles that men and women play in relationships, or men and men, or women and women play in these kinds of relationships. In the video game, she has a much more utilitarian function, right? Because there's a certain narrative where she serves as sort of a gateway to get to the Joker, right? You must overcome Harley Quinn. So I'm not sure that there's as much of a nuanced character there in the video games as there probably is in the comic books.
In the Arkham Asylum game, there's actually a lot of references, if you listen to the video clips, back to Mad Love, and they actually quote it word for word in many places. But then, if you listen, the thing that really fascinated me was the difference between how Joker actually talked to Harley and how he talked to Batman within the video clips. And so really the thing that was interesting to me was how he spoke to Batman rather than how he spoke to Harley, because there's a very, very clear difference between those within the video game itself.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely an astute observation. I think there's something to be said there that maybe Harley is just sort of a mask for his love affair between him and Batman, right? And you can see that the way it plays out and the way that the dialogue is written. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably agree with you in saying that I think there's probably more of a relationship between Batman and the Joker than there is between the Joker and Harley in the video game. In the latter video game, she has a bit of a bigger role because the Joker is obviously sick, so he doesn't really show up till about halfway through. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that would be a very interesting discussion about, is she a beard, right? Is she sort of masking the Joker's love of Batman? Mm-hmm. Possibly. Yeah. I'm not really sure though.
Well, and one of the articles in the book takes on the Joker-Harley relationship. And it's, I think one of the more perceptive pieces in the book, and also certainly one of the more important ones, because that relationship is really important for, again, sort of thinking about how this universe reflects upon our society today. The only other thing I would say about it is, in terms of fandom, I think it's really interesting that, according to my informal poll of my trip to WonderCon a couple weeks ago, Harley appears to be the most popular character to cosplay for women. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things to unpack from that. And my favorite cosplay that I saw there was a Joker-Harley combo, which there are plenty of. A guy, the male will dress up as the Joker and the female as Harley, but they reversed it. So it was a female Joker and a male Harley, and I was like, yes, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to take away from that, but it's clearly a touchstone for many female fans of the universe.
All right, where did the microphone end up? Okay, if we could pass it back. Afterwards, after your question.
My question is, which storyline would you say did the most to and which one would you say explains its motives more than others?
Good question. What's the defining storyline of the Joker?
Well, I'm going to be cliche and say Killing Joke. You know, Alan Moore's The Killing Joke in a lot of ways. But also, the one up here is my personal favorite, Steve Englehart's The Laughing Fish story.
I mean, I think is it Death of the Family where he cuts off his face?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always get the two confused.
Well, it's a precursor, but he wears the cut-off face in Death of the
I mean, I
Family.
think that, for me, solidifies the Joker's level of commitment, right, to the cause. Like, this dude is committed. And so that, for me, sort of, and the imagery in that one really sort of, for me, is evocative of the Joker, is this idea that he's smiling and he carved his face off. So that's really disturbing in a very serious way. So that one for me is sort of, and then I have to keep saying The Dark Knight because I think that movie is a tremendous.
I think The Dark Knight for me, as much as I love The Killing Joke, the only thing I hesitate with that is because it does maybe go a little too far in canonizing that origin story. I like the slippage of that origin story, and as much as I love Moore's book, it does sort of, I don't know if it was the attempt, if it was the intent to sort of pin that down, but it does sort of feel like, okay, this is the definitive story, and I kind of like the idea that there isn't one. So The Dark Knight really, I think, sort of uses that notion to its advantage with that character.
In Perlmutter.
In answer to your question, I don't know what game it was, I'm blanking out, but it was some game where all the superheroes were in a battle in the future of Metropolis.
Injustice.
Yeah, and there's a moment there where the Joker says, nobody kills the Batman but me. So I guess that's exactly right.
There's the answer.
I remember now why I got this jacket. My identity was the Joker, but with his henchmen, because I felt that was a metaphor for being a graduate student. Because has anybody written about the henchmen? Because what are the motivations of henchmen?
Yes.
Because
They're a historically underrepresented
group. We're supposed to be so loyal to the professors, and yes sir, absolutely. Jump into a firing ring of poop or something. Yes sir, absolutely, no problem. And they're so sacrificial. And I remember in the original, in the Nicholson film, like they're just randomly. I mean, I never understood the motivation. He kills Bob, his second in command, just because he feels like.
He always liked Bob.
How do you recruit more henchmen? I mean, ISIS does a much better job than any bad guy supervillain. But what is the motivation to be a henchman? And is there any henchman that's fleshed out to actually what?
Isn't there a whole comic where?
Or are they just all underwritten?
They're usually underwritten. I mean, I'm sure that there's probably some stories. We haven't read all of them, obviously, but that's one of the things we say in the introduction is that the Joker never seems to run out of henchmen, but it never ends up well for them, and they usually never end up getting paid, nor do they usually end up staying alive. So that's an interesting question. Or, I didn't mention this earlier, but one of my favorite films is the feature film, the Batman Superman animated movie, when the Joker teams up with Lex Luthor. It doesn't end well for Luthor. Okay? It just doesn't, Not that Luthor gets killed, but things end up, chaotic. And so, it's a really great question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and Nolan nods to it right away in The Dark Knight. I mean, that whole opening sequence is about that very thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Question back here.
So, Rob Weiner, you said that Batman was dark. I kind of think it's more like Batman is kind of trapped in a situation of cowardliness and pure insanity. Because if you look in Justice, Superman does want to kill the Joker. If he gets it, he's not gonna just throw a boomerang. He's gonna tie up his lab and do some crazy things to him. But the thing is, if he does that, he would be like the thing about Joker. Like, I think the Joker does want Batman to kill him because the thing is, the Joker wants Batman to show his true side. But yes, I believe Batman is a coward because let's be honest, if you're running around in a batsuit, you probably have problems. So
Agreed.
It is true. But the thing is, Batman he knows Joker's game. He sort of does this. Because if he knows Joker's going to keep pushing him until he does it. Until Joker frees Batman.
Yeah, and that's what Ryan touches on in his chapter is that Joker sees that Batman is the Joker too,
Right.
and they're both there. It's just a matter of getting him over that edge.
And I think that's the problem, right? Is Batman won't commit to it, and that's the Joker's real problem. And you say, well, it's either sanity or insanity, and what I would probably argue is that there's a certain freeing element to insanity, right? I mean, the Joker is radically free, right?
I think Batman is insane. It's just that he won't admit it.
He is.
Yeah,
That's true.
and that's the thing is when you lie to yourself, that's what makes Batman a coward. Is he's really lying to himself, and he knows better. I mean, he knows he's lying to himself, and he keeps doing it.
Actually, there is a psychological study called Batman and Psychology that argues Batman is perfectly sane.
Okay, let's go. Last question, and then
Travis Langley?
I know there's a lot more questions, but we are running out of time. We're past time, so we're going to go last question. But please stick around. There are some great refreshments, and these fine gentlemen are going to stick around and answer every question you might have. So let's go. Last question of the panel, and then please stick around, eat, enjoy, and grill them further.
First of all, have you done any research on Cormac McCarthy?
Where are you? I don't.
Or back here.
Oh, okay. Have we done any research on Cormac McCarthy?
Particularly his book, Blood and Radio.
I've read the book.
Okay, would you say that it's almost compare the Joker to Judge Holden? He's this like really unknown force of like morality, and he could be perceived as almost a symbolism of sin and guilt, but he could also be perceived as like sanity in I don't know how to say it, but would you say it to that?
Yeah, that's.
It would have to be flipped, though, right? He would have come after the Joker.
Well, that's an interesting comparison. I've only read the book once, and it was some time ago, so I'm going to tread carefully here. But, I think any of these characters that sort of seem to transcend the usual binaries that we set for ourselves, and that seem to, kind of float through the story instead of being subject to the same rules of gravity and so on. I mean, I think that they all share a certain thing in common, and certainly that character does some of those things, as does Anton Chigurh, right, in No Country for Old Men, which you worked on. So yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that the Joker is, in addition to being the Joker, is he's also a manifestation of a character type or an archetype, and that's one of the things that we haven't talked much about, but that sort of comes through in the book quite a bit, is that Trickster, Loki, Coyote, like all these sort of archetypal characters are manifest in the Joker as well. So it's not surprising that he may echo across other media as well in different manifestations.
All right, so we're going to close out this event for the evening, and as our moderator suggested, please stick around, ask some more questions, buy a book, we'll enjoy refreshments. But before they go, I want to present them with a little gift. There's one for each of them that is an awesome poster done by our very talented staff here in the library. And for our moderator,
It's a bomb!
it is. Shh. Don't just open it later. Open it later. It's some awesome library swag. You'll love it. All right. So thank you again, everyone, for coming out, and
Yes,
we hope
thank
to
you.
see you at our next library event. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your questions, and we appreciate it.
I'm gonna go home and watch The Dark Knight now. I know, because that movie, like, the more I watch it, the more I'm like, yes, you got it right.
Yeah.
Because there are just so many